So, and one more thing we'd like to do is thank our volunteers.
Absolutely, because
Yes, big
this could
round
not
of
happen
applause.
unless we had volunteers.
It
Because
is-
I'm not the one that's going to set up all those chairs, so no.
And it is essential to have volunteers, and we would really like to reach out to you if you'd like to get involved. We have a job for you, I guarantee you. Whatever your skill may be, we got a job for you because it takes many hands to make light work, correct? So please come join us. We'd love for you to participate and help grow the movement. You're going to be making history.
Absolutely, yes. So I guess we're going to start with the introductions. I'm going to, Chris, get you out of the chair there, and then we're going to start this up.
Right.
Absolutely.
And who is starting today?
We are starting with Art.
Art, right,
Art.
because Catherine started yesterday. So
Absolutely. So give me a second so I can set up my timer. And you can now begin.
You with your timer and that evil red. What was very good yesterday, I was approached by someone yesterday that came to me and said, I have been in politics all my life. I have watched many debates. This is the first time ever that before the debate, actually people prayed. And I'm thinking it's a remarkable thing, but it's also a tragic thing. And I'm thinking to myself, and I can't help it, I'll repeat myself from yesterday, if they were liberals here or NDPs, they would probably drop dead right away, just because they would be forced to participate in a prayer. That's how far we have fallen from the foundation, from the history of this country. Why is this important to me? Because I grew up behind the Iron Curtain. I grew up under the boots of the Soviets, and over there was the government that was telling you how you are allowed to live your life, and the government was telling you what you can believe in. The government was telling you that they are gods and you are slaves, and whatever they say was the law. Is that not what we have seen in the past 3 years? Every time Hincha would come on television, it was automatically a law. Every time traitor Kenny would come on television, it was automatically a law. I've seen this movie before. You see, I grew up in a country like this, and I escaped that country, and I came to Canada. Why Canada? Because this was the nation that was not offering me money. You see, we didn't care about money. You can be the richest man on earth, but if you're living in a golden cage, you're still a slave. We did not come here for money. We came here for freedom. And that freedom has been stolen, not just from me. That freedom was stolen from my children. And you see, at one time, I decided, this is the hill I'm willing to die on. Freedom. Freedom for everyone to choose his own path. Freedom for my children and your children. That they will be able one day to choose what kind of a nation, what kind of a city, what kind of a town, what kind of a farming, what kind of a beef production they're going to be able to participate in. Not some tyrants in Ottawa that do not care if we live or die. For me, this is a repetition of history. And I decided to stand up and fight. I'm a father. I'm a family man. I love my wife. I have 3 children. And one of the stories, a sad story, was when I was arrested in 2006, and my oldest son was 5 years old at that time, and he looked through the window when I went to feed the poor after my arrest and said to his mom, to my wife, is daddy going to be arrested again? Is he going to come back home? You see, that's how far we have fallen. 2005, 2006, I was told by this totalitarian government that feeding the poor is no longer acceptable. You have to have special permission to distribute Bibles, to go and feed the poor and hang around with them. Are you kidding me? You tyrant? Who do you think you are, you uncircumcised Philistines? That you should defy the armies of the living God. You were a servant. We elected you to serve us. You're not feeding the poor, and you're going to harass and attack those that do. So I fought, and I fought, and I won. And this is what you need. Alberta needs a warrior that will fight to the death. A warrior, a fighter that will come and say to Trudeau, who do you think you are? You're running on your daddy's last name, but you yourself, you are just a little potato. and you do not represent nothing on your own. We need a leader that will stand up, and stand up for whom? For you and for your children. We are Albertans. Yes, we are Canadians. I love my country. I love Alberta, but we are Albertans. Here we are deciding how our children, or what kind of a future our children are going to have. Right now, the federal government is infringing on everything. And I say, enough of talking, enough of negotiation. I don't want to sit and negotiate. I'm done with negotiating. I'm done with that. Today, with your help, I am demanding what's rightfully ours. I want to force the federal government to come and say, please take your rights, because we don't want to lose you. We need to force them to give us what rightfully belongs to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Art. Catherine, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for being here today. And for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting and who haven't heard me speak before, I'm just going to let you know a little bit about myself. I've practiced law, family law in particular, for over 20 years here in Alberta, and I've spent the majority of my life helping families navigate very challenging circumstances. And today, of course, we all know that we're all facing challenging circumstances. And I'm also a mother to 2 children, ages 10 and 14, and stepmother to 2 children, ages 11 and 12. And I'm here today because I want a better future for all of our children. I want a world for them where they have a choice about whether or not they want to receive a medical intervention. I want to know, as a mom, that when I send my children to a public school, I can be assured that they will not be manipulated or groomed with a political agenda that will convince them that men are women or can be women and women can be men. These ideas have no place in school, any school, which receives government funding. I want a world for them where they can purchase groceries or attend a concert without to scam themselves and face ridicule and persecution should they not comply with the latest government-mandated human experiment. I want a world for them where the truth is not censored and we are all able to speak freely without being canceled. In December 2020, I co-founded Lawyers for Truth, and in July 2021, I commenced a legal challenge against the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta and the Provincial Court of Alberta for violating my inalienable rights and freedoms by requiring me to wear a mask and provide my medical health information to a stranger as a condition of entering a public courthouse in Calgary. I've shared the rally with Pastor Art on many occasions the past few years, and after months of reading decisions in Canada and in Alberta from the justices that were agreeing with the government's narrative that they were all justified in breaching our charter rights and that the COVID vaccine was safe and effective, despite evidence to the contrary, I decided that it was time to pivot and focus on a political solution and to become a lawmaker. I have not always been the supporter of independence. Quite frankly, I never gave it much of a thought until about 8 months ago when I learned that by holding a referendum on independence, Alberta would draw its line in the sand and we could finally gain some leverage with Ottawa to get a better deal within Confederation. I've been speaking for 8 months about that. Despite decades of Ottawa ignoring Ottawa and implementing policies and regulations designed only to weaken Alberta and Albertans, and as a result of the new attacks on Albertans' rights and freedoms by Ottawa and other legacy parties, including the UCP and the NDP, it is now necessary for Alberta to chart a new course and make a different political choice. A choice that is not about right or left, but rather a choice that is based in truth, values, and ethics. The Canadian Charter and the Alberta Bill of Rights both acknowledge in their preambles that we are founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. It is not lost on me the power of having both myself, a woman, a mother, a lawyer, and a representative of the rule of law, and Artur, who is a pastor, father, a lion, a real man, a representative of God. Both of us vying for this leadership role. Regardless of the outcome of this leadership race, I believe both of us will be required to face down the principalities of flesh and not of the flesh. For what we are about to set out to accomplish will require all hands on deck. I hope you enjoy today's debate.
Thank you, Captain. So now we're going to start the questions. We have some predetermined questions. So the first one will be answered by Arthur. So over the past 2.5 years, many public service frontline workers have been silenced by upper management bureaucrats when they have voiced concerns or feedback to improve the level of service they bring for Albertans. For example, doctors, nurses, teachers, etc. Question: as the Premier, how will you ensure they have adequate support for feedback or input?
Well, first of all, I want to say they were betrayed by their unions. Let's start with that. The unions, the unions were supposed to protect them from any form of abuse or coming from government or from other sources, but they did not. You see, the level of betrayal starts from the top and goes all the way down. So what we have to do is we have to deal with the unions, and we have to restructure the unions so when something like this would ever happen again, the people will be protected. We're talking about frontliners. We're talking about the people that are saving our loved ones. They're saving lives, the firefighters, the police officers, the nurses, the doctors. They were completely silenced by a form of being terrorized by the government. If you will not follow the narrative of the government, we're going to take your license away. We're going to take your job away. We're going to take your pension away. That's unacceptable in any democratic society. You have to go back after the villains, and I have been saying this like a broken record. We have to remember who did this to us. Remember their names. It was coming from the premiers, it was coming from the MLAs, it was coming from the unions, and it was forwarded by the chief of police. And of course, the corrupted RCMP that needs to go ASAP from Alberta. Also was forwarded by corrupted fake news. They were the ones that were pushing, terrorizing the whole nation. We need to bring accountability back to our country.
We're suggesting that these people, the elected officials, and that a board be created to hold people accountable with annual reviews. And this is something that should also apply for those people in this upper management that seem to believe that they're immune from any scrutiny and from being held accountable. In fact, we put forward this policy in the last policy debate convention, and so I encourage you to look at the website for more information. To a situation where we hire people based on merit and not on cronyism, etc., in the government. I also believe that it's time that we have some whistleblower legislation introduced in this. Like the frontline workers who are seeing the corruption, the devastation, the harm that was being caused in these institutions. And lastly, what I would suggest is that we need to look at these colleges, the College of Physicians and Surgeons, the Law Society, and these organizations that are self-governing. because clearly they haven't done their job.
Thank you, Catherine.
I'll just add that we have to sever the World Health Organization. No more tyranny coming from outside.
Yeah. I echo that. I think that when you look at it, AHS boasts about their affiliation with the WHO on their website. And I think now that we know, and I always say this when I speak, now that we know better, we do better. And we have to now be brave enough and stand in our courage to confront these people and continue to push in order for them to be held accountable. This is very key, and being able to heal as a population in a new country going forward.
Thank you very much. We're just going to do a quick cable patch here. There we go. I'll get Dana to ask the next question.
Okay. So there is a growing sense of support for a referendum on independence in Saskatchewan and Northern BC. Isn't it fun? I know. Where's our RT here, man? Okay, check 1, 2. All right. So, I'll start again. There is a growing sense of support for a referendum on independence in Saskatchewan and Northern BC. The question, will you engage in those regions in conversation regarding Alberta's own discussion? How can we work together with those regions to find some unity in that conversation? Do you feel that the conversation is beneficial or detrimental?
Well, yes, of course, I think we need to have conversations with these regions, and I believe that it's only by us individuals coming together and unifying that we are going to have hope in defeating these evil globalists and elites from trying to destroy our way of life. They are our friends, they are our families, they are our trade partners, business partners, and we need to mutually support each other and be willing to have open ears and open arms to individuals that share our values. So, indeed, I believe this conversation is beneficial, and it's quite necessary, because when we are successful with the referendum on independence and when we leave Canada, we are going to need to have these alliances with these other parts of Canada, and the US included, and we are going to need to foster these relationships, because we are going to need to support them as well in their endeavors. Thank you.
Well, I would say to you, more BC, less Ottawa. More Manitoba, less Ottawa. But we have to focus on Alberta first. I mean, how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time. So we can have those unrealistic at this moment, views or things that we can achieve. But I'll say to you, let's start here in our own city, in our own province, because we have huge problems. Alberta first, we got to focus on Alberta. And here's what I believe is going to happen when other provinces and territories are going to see our success, because I'll tell you, if we do this the right way, we will succeed. Alberta has the potential of becoming a North American Saudi Arabia. We have more than enough oil and resources. This is a beautiful country. I mean, this is one of the most beautiful, incredible regions on earth. We have everything. We can become a paradise of wealth right here. But first, we have to get rid of the tyrants. We got to focus on Alberta. When we're going to do that, then we can start spreading the wildfire, if you will, of freedom to other provinces. When they will see us succeeding, when they're going to see us winning, I'm telling you, you will not have to force them to come to the table. They will be coming to you saying, how did you do it? We want to be part of this revolution of freedom. So I would focus on Alberta first. And like I said, More BC, less Ottawa.
Do you have any other moment? You got 2 more minutes because Catherine just, are you good?
I think she's good.
I
I think she's good.
we're
We'll
good.
just continue on with these other questions.
All righty.
So this one's to Art. Alberta's independence has been criticized because it's a landlocked province. Question: how can you reassure the agricultural industry that an independent Alberta won't hurt them or their livelihoods by being a landlocked province?
My goodness, those people that are saying this, they have never been in Europe. You've got so many countries in Europe that don't have access to water, and yet they prosper. Switzerland. I mean, do I need to say more? That's not the problem. And by the way, we have amazing neighbors. We got Montana right there. I say, let's work with our neighbors. Let's work with our older brothers. We have done it for hundreds of years, and we were highly prosperous and successful. We cannot keep jabbing at our neighbors. And as a pastor, as a Christian, I'll tell you that do unto a neighbor as you would do unto yourself. So we have to restore that relationship. We have to work together. And even if Ottawa was saying, no, we're not going to cooperate, I'll say, fine. Fine, okay, be blessed on your own, and we're going to partner with other nations. And if British Columbia will say, no, we're not going to allow you to go to our territory, we'll go through Montana. I'm telling you, Americans will gladly work with us. I wouldn't worry about that at all. I mean, Alberta is a gem. This is a Saudi Arabia of North America. If we have power, we're going to turn this land into such a prosperous region that people will be begging us to do business with them. They're not going to say, I don't want to have anything to do with you. No, they will be coming and they will be saying, I want to do business with you. We're going to create a model like this country have not seen for a very long time. You see, what is independence? Look at this. Prosperity, freedom, opportunity, that has been taken away from us and our children as well. This needs to stop.
Thank you, Arthur. Catherine?
Well, I agree with Arthur. And, we have to utilize and foster the relationship with the United States. That makes the most sense for Alberta, given that we border the United States. And so, of course, we are going to be developing those relationships. But, I want to talk about something a little bit different with respect to where we are from this point of view of what we're accepting as a society. And we need to, I think, rethink how we view things, in particular, whether or not we are going to continue to pretend that this climate change hoax is still a thing, and that is influencing our agricultural industries, our oil and gas industries, and we have to decide whether or not we are going to continue to implement policies, and I suggest we don't, to ensure that we are successful, prosperous, and that we create the abundance in Alberta. And, just as what was said yesterday, I believe, people will be attracted to Alberta because we are going to be and have the spirit of freedom and the spirit of this new way of life and the spirit of standing in truth. And so when we have that as a nation, people will be drawn to Alberta. And I believe that we will be able to create those relationships with other countries in addition to the United States that will want to work with us and will want to work against the globalists and push them to make sure that they're working with a country like Alberta.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm gonna tighten that question just a little bit too. It was about the agricultural industry. So I'd also like to know your comments about what's happening with the nitrogen fertilizer and the farmers.
Well, this is a global agenda to control people or societies, if you will, by limiting the food sources. I mean, we have seen this in history so many times. I don't have to mention Stalinism and what he did by murdering millions, tens of millions of his own people by controlling the food. This whole idea is to control and to block people from prosperity. I mean, that's what it is. They want to control every aspect. When during the 2.5 years of this craziness, this tyranny, this lie, Walmarts, Safeways, IKEAs, Costco's were prospering. They are big organizations. They're part of the deal. They're part of the elites. They're the pharaohs. You're the slaves. But the shops across the street were shut down. It didn't make any sense unless you know the game. And the game is to limit food supply, because when you do that, you control the society, you control a nation. That's what they're doing. This whole thing is a hoax. It's a big, fat lie. It has been done before as well. And I agree with the global warming. I mean, this is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. While right now, just a few days ago, I received the news from the north that we have more ice and there are ships trapped right now because of cold weather over there. 70-year historical lows that we have right now, so much for global warming, right? And CO2 emissions and all that garbage. Don't you understand that if you eliminate that, you're going to die because you're going to freeze to death? People, unfortunately, some people will not like me. I say, Google it up. I mean, you don't have to believe me. Google it up, and there's lots of information over there, even on Google, that you can find. Our farmers are the best farmers on earth. We need to support them, not hurt them.
Thank you very much.
Well, of course, it's a farce, and we understand what's happening because we know that this is an agenda. It's a regime change, and Canada is being regime changed, and we are going to, be ushered into a one world new order. And this is actually the true problem. It's not about climate change, and it's about controlling us as citizens to do whatever these globalists want us to do. So again, these people want to destroy us, but it's not just these people that want to destroy us, it's Ottawa that is going along with it. And you know what? Stephen Harper ushered this in with the Paris Climate Accord. And so this is what the problem is, and this is what's problem with these legacy parties that, haven't been honest with Canadians. And so where Alberta is going to thrive, I believe, is that we can beat this because we can lead this revolution, and this is how we do it. We change the zeitgeist of our community. We have to be transparent, and we have to expose the lies that these governments have spun in imposing this agenda on us. And so this one world order is not going to come to Alberta, okay? We have been treated as slaves, and subjects, not citizens, among other things. So we are going to have to level up as this new country, and we will have to be transparent and tell the truth. And I know that through that, we will be divinely guided, and we will defeat this globalist agenda.
Thank you, Kathy. Did you want to add something? I know
I just want to talk about beef just a little bit. I know the majority of people here are beef eaters just like me, especially AAA Alberta. It's the best on earth. Our industries has been attacked. Agriculture, beef, farmers, right? Why? They have said that publicly that they want you to eat worms and they don't want you to eat beef. Why? And I'm not going to sound like a Polish politician or a pastor even, because beef are farting too much. And I'm thinking to myself, what about the trillions of crickets? They do not produce anything? And we're replacing one food source with another, except we are murdering our own industry. There's a plan, there is an agenda, and I hope that people see that. There is an agenda to destroy the middle class in Alberta, not just Alberta, to destroy our industry, because our industry keeps us prosperous, free, and not dependent on those devils in Ottawa.
Catherine, do you want one more minute against that? Want to speak one more towards that?
Well, I agree. I mean, I was reading an article to my daughter the other day about how there's gonna, they boil larvae and they create a butter-like substance and they bake with it. I mean, there's a reason behind getting humanity off of beef and meat products and into crickets. And it has to do with the way our bodies function as human beings. Not all of us are going to be able to survive that because it won't provide the nutritional value that we require as human beings. So this, we need to be able to recognize as a society that there's evil that exists in this world. And these people, this agenda is being spun at us from multiple levels. The food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, weather. I mean, and this information is readily available for people who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And so we can't project anymore as citizens that everybody is good in this world because I'm a good person. It's not good enough anymore because there's too many factors that are pointing to the exact same scenario where we are all suffering. Inflation is at an all-time high. We are going to make decisions very soon whether or not we are going to be able to heat our house or drive our children to school. Whether or not we are going to be able to go to the grocery store to feed our children. So we don't have any more time. In my opinion, we need to take action now, and so that's why it's so critical for us all to get involved in this movement.
Okay, now, we will now move on to the undetermined questions. And the first one we have is, a referendum on independence is an example of an important conversation which requires input from all Albertans. What are some other examples of conversations which you believe require a provincial referendum? And we'll start with Catherine.
Well, I mean, let's talk about, we're going to have to, are you talking about in this new scenario, this new country that we're proposing? Or are we talking about a referendum in our current political system? Because if it's the latter, we've seen with the last referendum with respect to equalization payments, that referendum, despite the overwhelming success, the Albertans were clear with respect to wanting to, renegotiate equalization. Where did that land us? Where did that land us? Nowhere, right? I think Jason Kenney tabled something and then wrote a letter. And after that, it's basically, gone off and we won't hear anything probably about it until we win the next election. So, I believe we need to engage the population. We need to inspire Albertans to want to get involved in decision making. How many people can say honestly that they want to have a voice at the table? Okay, a couple of hands went out. How many people are in this room? Because responsibility, for that to occur, we need to engage everybody to become and want to be more responsible and want to participate. How many people do I know, truth be told, that don't want, actually, a good friend of mine, about all of this nonsense with COVID. She says to me, Catherine, I don't care. And that is tragic for me. And so I think we need to spend our time re-engaging with people so that they do care, so that they do get involved and that they do participate, and that we can, as a community of individuals, come together. I was red card.
Arthur?
Is that the first red card? I think that was the first red card.
Thank God. Now we're 2-2.
Yeah, we're 2-2.
Again, I don't feel so bad. Education. I mean, we need a referendum on education. What are we teaching our children in school? Are we teaching them history, or we are indoctrinating them? Because let me suggest something to you, that so far what I have seen, I have 3 children in school, they're being indoctrinated if they're in a public school. I took them off the public school so they would not be indoctrinated. Healthcare. We need to have a say in healthcare. Only public, or we can allow private. If you can afford it, wouldn't you prefer to have a private means to save your life if the lineup is 20 years? Common sense. We should be a country that allows people to make their own choices. Not a nanny government that is telling you, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough doctors, so please die. Can you do it quickly? This is what we have been seeing for the past 3 years. They were deciding, bureaucrats were deciding if your loved ones can live or die, and how they are going to live and how they're going to die. That makes me sick, absolutely sick. Because as a pastor, I deal with tragedy on a regular basis. People come to me and say, I've lost my father, I lost my grandma, I couldn't even see them. They died alone in depression. They just give up on their lives because of whom? Of the government, the bureaucrats that should protect our lives. We should have a say in education. We should have a say in healthcare. We should have a say in every aspect of life that affects us and our children.
Well, we should have a say, but we should also have smaller government. I mean, the fact that, we have to go, or we're expected, and we've become, as a society, so reliant on waiting for what the government is going to tell us before we act. We need smaller government, and we need it out of our lives. We do want to be left alone. We want to be left alone to create the education for our children that we want them to learn. We want them to thrive by learning skills that actually make a difference in their life. Not what they're being told now, and in a school system where they're actually advocating erasing history because it hurts somebody's feelings. So, I agree. We do need more say in that, but we also need less government. We need less regulations. We are regulated to death. We need less licenses. We need less fees. Every time you turn around, there's a fee or a regulation or a license to live your life. That has to end.
Homeschooling, private clinics, with a message to the government, back off. This is not your business. This is our business, because those are our children and those are our loved ones.
Yeah.
So the first of many questions from the floor, and we all know that the federal government is basically trying to take away our guns. And now that they've prohibited us from importing guns. So the question is, do you have a plan to protect legal firearm owners? Pastor.
Not only guns, I mean, this is straight from the playbook, How to Become a Tyrant. It's so obvious. Disarm your population in order to subdue, or if you will, enslave your population. We've seen this before, and not that long ago. So I just don't want to be stuck with guns. All our property rights, because guns are our property. Back off. Look what happened in High River. Those people had no rights to do what they did, and just because they were wearing a uniform, which now is a disgrace, they just entered private property and they stole our private property. That's what I have seen during the Soviet era. That's what I have seen or remembered being told by my grandparents, that's what the Nazis did. And people ask me, why are you calling those nice police officers Gestapo and Nazi? Well, because they act like Nazis. Stop acting like Nazis, I'll stop calling you Nazis. I am a legal gun owner. I have my rifles, I have my pistol, I have my revolver. I had to go through the training. I had to apply all kinds of different permits. I have to store my firearm properly. It has to be locked, separate from my ammunition. I go through the roadblocks, through the hoops, and the government says to me, well, but that's not good enough. Well, if it's good enough for the Trudeau-Castro security personnel, it's good enough for me.
Yeah.
Catherine?
Yeah, they think, the current governments think that we're all, a bunch of morons. Like, we know what's happening right now. And the fact that Justin Trudeau did this recent maneuver by restricting or suspending gun sales by executive order, I mean, that's repugnant in a democracy. And every sitting MLA that allowed that to or MP that allowed that to happen needs to also be held accountable. You see, in the new Alberta, there will be provisions in the Constitution to ensure that people have the right to own a gun and to carry a gun. Because and you know why? Because it's for the exact reason that is occurring right now. That is why that provision was put into the American Constitution. It was to protect us from our governments. And so we need to be very concerned about this next step, because it's in the playbook, as Art has said. And so we need to ensure that we push back right now. We don't wait until the election. We push back right now against this. Because if they are successful in allowing this to occur long term, just like anything else, masking, vaccination, et cetera, we are going to lose even more. And we don't need to.
If I was the premier, I would use notwithstanding clause. I would say to the government, to the federal government, back off. Also, people are asking what will happen if the federal government will decide to invade or to come. Well, we're going to have our own police force that will protect us, that will be accountable to the government and to the people that elected that government, not to someone that is thousands of miles away, that doesn't care, is vacationing more than he's actually working. Not to that kind of a person. I'm a hunter. I love my freedom. I don't feel freer than when I take my gun and I go to the mountains, to the bush. It's the most beautiful feeling. And they're after that. They're after our independence. They want to control every aspect of our life. And they have an agenda. Don't kid yourself. This gun grab is another implementation of tyranny. Mark my words. And if you don't believe me, don't believe my accent. I've seen this movie before.
The only thing I would add to this is that, I was speaking to somebody who's recently, he flew, how do you say that? He flew Canada. He left Canada, moved to a different country where they're not seeing this sort of tyranny. And in particular, a state in the United States that is, hasn't imposed all of this ridiculousness on its citizens. And he said something what I thought really resonated with me. And I don't know if it will resonate with you, because I think this is something that you can only experience when, or feel it when you experience. And he said, Catherine, it's funny because the freer you are, the safer you are. right? And I think that makes a lot of sense because he was saying to me, I don't have to worry about the government imposing this rule. I don't have to worry about the government coming into my home and into my business. I don't have to worry about receiving healthcare because I can pay for it and it's going to be the best healthcare ever, right? Because they have options. They have options of choice. And so that is the world. That is the world that I want for my children. And I leave that with you here today because I think that is ultimately the goal that we all want for our families.
And it's also a provincial jurisdiction. Back off Ottawa from our property rights. Is that not fascinating when you go to United States and the states that have freedom, if it comes to guns, they have the lowest crime in the country? How come New York is one of the most dangerous places on earth and they have strict gun control? Have you ever asked yourself that question, that their rhetoric just does not make any sense because they have an agenda. Their agenda is to enslave you. And if you're armed to the teeth, well, that makes it harder.
Yeah.
All right. So when the Independence Party becomes a majority government, how will you, as a leader, hold Premier Jason Kenney, Tyler Shandro, Dina Hinshaw, and all of the other individuals accountable for the mandates that they've imposed and how they've hurt Albertans?
Well, I've said on multiple occasions that I think we do need to have an independent inquiry. I mean, we know what we've seen and by their actions, right? But we need to get to really to the bottom of it and to do our due diligence and to do an investigation with respect to what exactly happened with this COVID tyranny and all that. And then we have to hold them accountable. That is very key in all of this, both civilly and criminally. They are not going to get some sort of deal and flee off to Argentina, okay? They are going to stay here and they are going to face the music because we are not going to be able to heal as a country, heal as a new nation without holding these people accountable. And even if we don't become a new nation, this is something that I believe is quite necessary. And in fact, my petition in May of 2020 that I sent to all MPs and all MLAs across Canada I called for this public inquiry immediately because I knew as soon as there was a coordinated message with respect to COVID-19, I knew that there was something fishy. And I also knew that the government didn't do what they were supposed to do, which was to have this debated in the House of Commons and in all legislatures across Canada. And what they didn't do was a cost-benefit analysis. And what they didn't do was speak to the experts. And what they didn't do was verify whether or not there was a pandemic to even begin with. And so we need to hold them accountable by understanding the depths of the depravity of what they put us through.
The answer is very simple. Nuremberg trials number 2. Why Nuremberg was so successful? Because it was a symbol. They understood at that time they cannot bring 100,000 Nazis and charge them. That was an impossibility. And here is where I disagree with firing every AHS worker. That's an impossibility. We can't just fire all of them, all the villains. With some of them, we have to deal differently. But we can go for the arch villains. We can go for those people that they were the decision-making devils, like Kenney, Shandro, Taves. Those are the people that have been enslaving us and destroying and actually murdering our loved ones throughout the 2.5 years of craziness, tyranny, lie, I call it, the COVID lie. So Nuremberg trial is an idea for justice. Some people say to me, well, we have to move on and forget. You can't. You cannot move as a society if you will let those people off the hook. You have to remember their names. You have to go back and find out what really happened. I'll tell you why this is important. If you don't do it, just a matter of time, some other villains will show up. They'll have different names, different faces, but they will try to pull the same stunt on the rest of us. That's why we have to send a very, very clear message to those villains saying, hey, if you ever try something like this again, this is what is going to happen to you. Kenny should be arrested for crimes against humanity. The Minister of Justice, Madhu, or the so-called Minister of Justice, Chandra, right now. I mean, what a joke, what a mockery of justice. They all should be charged for treason.
Yeah, I agree with that. And but in addition to Nuremberg, see, one of the problems that we faced in the legal profession, and and I'm very disappointed in the legal profession. However, we've faced this time and time again. Well, the Nuremberg Code, it's not actually law in Canada, right? It's a principle. It's something that happened, and then we have to be careful with this if we do Nuremberg 2.0, because most of the people that were actually to be tried were actually not held accountable, and they just went to different jurisdictions to start up Big Pharma and IB Farben and things like that. So we have to be careful with that as a society, where these people go. So, but we also have to make sure that those principles in the Nuremberg Code, that people will not be coerced and you need to have consent, that needs to be built into our Constitution, because many people have argued that it's not applicable in Canadian law right now. And so that's problematic, and that's not being used in terms of a valid or an acceptable argument to many judges right now. So we have to be careful with that, and we have to ensure that those principles of informed consent, etc., that they find their way into the Constitution and into our laws in Alberta right now, so that this can truly never happen again.
If it comes to the villains running away, I would say only this. Well, less snakes in the grass in Alberta. If Ottawa wants them, you know what? I'll buy them ticket.
So this is kind of a mixture of different questions, but I'm just going to put these together. So as you're aware, the federal government made some political prisoners, and our provincial government also made some political prisoners, Pastor Art. And the 4 men that are still in jail in Coutts.
Yeah.
And one that was arrested the other day, but let go. So this question's to you, Pastor Art. What would you do to prevent this sort of thing happening in the future with political prisoners?
Accountability, electing judges, having our own police force that actually listens to Albertans, not to Ottawa, not to the tyrants in Ottawa. Also, we have to vindicate those people. Let's say if we had the power right now, all of those individuals, including myself, I'm still facing 4 trials, and I'm the first Canadian ever to be charged with terrorism for my speech in Coutts. Can you imagine? I have been charged under the interfering with the infrastructure under the Defense Act. The Crown Prosecutor, he said that I have caused Canada over $400 million worth of damages because I gave my speech to the truckers telling them, stand for your rights, do it peacefully, hold the line. We are talking about extremely corrupted system. Those people that were fired, those people that lost businesses like you, they need to be vindicated, but not just that. They need to be recompensated. For every, like my wife said, for every minute they kept you like a dog in a cage, they should pay $1. And there was lots of minutes that they spent in metal cages, on concrete floors, in psych ward, in MAC spot. And we're talking about Canada. We're not talking about Soviet Russia. We're not talking about North Korea. We're not talking about China. Those boys are rotting in prison right now because of our provincial government. They're coming and telling you that, oh, we cannot interfere with the ongoing investigation. We cannot interfere with the court proceedings. That's a lie. And you can attest to this. Government official, a premier can pardon them right now or say, no, this is not in the best interest of Albertans.
Yeah. There's absolutely no will with our political elite structure right now to actually do anything. And what happened to Pastor Art and what has been happening to him for decades is absolutely repugnant in democratic society. And so, but the thing is we need to ensure that not only are they compensated, but they're properly compensated, and that this sort of malicious prosecution has to end, because what it does for people and for families is that it causes a stress, and it causes an extreme financial burden that really never truly gets compensated for, even if you get awarded costs in a court case, right? Because the stress and the toll that it has on a vet, not to mention loss of income, loss of opportunity, all of these things. So we need to make sure that we are helping these people, but at the same time, we have really good laws already on the books, but we don't have good people enforcing the law. Right? And so we need to weed out those people that, the injustice rooks, the injustice germains. We need to root these people out. And with elected judges, for instance, we will be able to hold them accountable, because these people have clearly become these political activists that do not have our interests. And I see this in family law as well. Many days I spend in court with family law clients where the justice is absolutely annoyed with the fact that he or she has to be there. It's actually disgusting. Thank you.
Pastor Art?
Every ticket thrown out.
Yes.
Every business that suffered. And I remember 2020, 2021, we were losing in the province of Alberta 10 to 15 businesses a day. That's what they've done. That's what they've done to our economy. That's what they have done to our loved ones. Those businesses should be recompensated. The people that are in prison set free with huge recompensation for their suffering, for the tyranny that was implemented by those wannabe tyrants. Every person that was subjected, every officer should be re-educated if it comes to constitutional rights and charter and rights of freedoms. The Minister of Justice should be held into account, both of them, Madhu and Chandra right now. And what an irony, the very man that shut down your business, the very man that invaded our church, the very man that put me in prison was a good Nazi, because he, as a Minister of Health, now received a ministerial, the highest ministerial. He is now a Minister of Justice. He is the very one that is continuing this persecution and prosecution in the province of Alberta. Chandra, is that not the case? That's your boss. This man that calls himself a Minister of Justice has total disregard to the system, to the checks and balances, to justice. It's a mockery.
I can't argue with that.
Okay, well, we're going to have our last question.
And actually, even though it's the last question, we do have lots of pages up here, and we're going to compile those, and we'll be asking those questions from the floor in Edmonton, in Grand Prairie, and in Fort Macleod. So,
Yeah.
just so you know. So your questions won't go unanswered. Thank you.
And many of the questions are repeat questions too, because a lot of the ones that we asked were many repeats, because they all want to know. So for the last question, under the independent Alberta, under an independent Alberta, would you support writing our own Charter of Rights and Freedoms? Who would you include to consult on those, what it would look like? And what would be one non-negotiable right that you must be included in this document?
Who's first?
That would be you.
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think we need to, of course, we need to look at constitutional lawyers for their advice in terms of how this might happen, but government doesn't give us our rights. We get them from God. And so this notion that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms or the Alberta Bill of Rights has carved out these things that purport to give us these innumerable grounds that allow us to do certain things is something that we need as a society to consider. I can tell you that we need to have, in whatever document does result in the new Alberta, or even going forward, when we're going through the legislation, ensuring that it doesn't, the legislation falls in line with principles that recognize the supremacy of God. We need to ensure that Section 1 of the Charter is something like that is eliminated from the Charter, because Section 1 of the Charter allowed for the government to come in and breach those rights that we have, right? So we need to make sure that any new document doesn't allow the government to come between what we have as inalienable rights from God and what they proclaim our rights to be. But they're all really important. And I can't just pick one, but freedom of speech comes probably at the top of my list, because if we don't have that freedom to say what we want, as we are experiencing now, there are massive consequences that we as a society are going to face. Oh, I was red card again.
Of course, all of our rights, God states human rights are as important, but one sticks more than others. That's your right to protest government. If that right goes, you've got tyrants. And that's what we have right now. Kenny is terrified of people coming together. That's why he shut down Milk River. That's why he shut down and arrested the boys. And that's why he charged me with terrorism, because what I was doing, I was encouraging people or giving them hope to stand up for that right, a right to protest tyrannical government. So I would say at this moment, this is a must. When you see a government official doing something wrong, evil against you and your family, you should rally 10,000 people and tell him what you think about it. I mean, that's your right. When that right goes, they're silencing you. They're putting you in isolation. And I've tried that, believe me. When this craziness, this lie came, I emailed every minister, every MLA. I sent an email to the mayor, and I was pleading when they wanted to shut down our soup kitchen. I reasoned with them. This doesn't make any sense. You're shutting down shelters. What do you think those 15, 20,000 homeless people are going to do roaming the streets of our cities without necessities of life? They're going to turn to crime. Feed them. No one would even reply to me. So what are our options? Rally 10,000 people and go and tell them what we think about their tyranny, telling them we're going to replace you, and the sooner the better. You're not fit to do this job.
Yeah. And another thing, we're going to have to, and immediately upon forming government, we have to look at these so-called human rights tribunals that have been set up all over the place that have, when you file a complaint with the Human Rights Tribunal in Alberta, it takes 1 year, years to wind through the system, but they're actually, they've carved out within these enumerated grounds that they claim that are our only rights, at least in Alberta. So, because if you look at the Alberta human rights legislation, it's very narrow what you fit into. So that's why, a medical or physical disability, when we tried as lawyers to fit, the medical interventions and the no masking within the confines of those narrowly provided rights that we have, that was a problem, because they were able to finagle their way out of it. And they were also able to finagle their way out of it because of Section 1, and because there was a justifiable emergency, apparently. And so, we have to, with Lawyers for Truth, it was always do not comply. It was always do not comply at all. Don't go to the grocery store with a mask. Don't do any of what they're asking us to do. Because when you participate in the lie, you're condoning the behavior.
I say enough of the kangaroo courts. I was denied entry. I was denied my right to pick up my mail. And I'm still facing criminal charges for that when I went without my mask to pick up my mail, which, as you know, it's a federal offense. If you would go to your neighbor and steal their mail, you can be arrested, charged, and thrown in prison. But I was denied service, and they refused to give me my mail. So what I did, I called the police, and they said, listen, there's a theft going on. They refuse to give me my mail. It's a federal offense. So police showed up, retrieved my mail, and the next day I was charged criminally for trespassing, not wearing a muzzle, and disturbing peace, criminal charges, which I'm facing to this day. So what I did, I went to the system, which is completely broken, and I filed a human rights complaint to the kangaroo court, just to prove my point that those people do not care about our charter rights and freedoms, our constitution. And I was right. They said, well, it was not justifiable. And they kicked that out. You have no protection whatsoever. So I think there is a better document that we can craft. We actually have it, the Bill of Rights. Our own Bill of Rights, Alberta Bill of Rights. We can also craft, with the help of lawyers, we can craft our own constitution that will protect Albertans from the tyranny of Ottawa. We can do that. We can have our independence. What is independence? If not freedom to live your life as you see fit, to be free to make your own decisions. You're adults, and you can make those decisions for your children, because they are your children, not through those children.
Thank you very much. We will now give the candidates 5 minutes each for their closing remarks, and we're going to start with Catherine.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for participating in this with us today. As a lawyer, when all of this, the last 2 years was unfolding, and at the very beginning of it, a lot of people were calling Lawyers for Truth, and they were asking us to help, and understandably so, right? And what I witnessed when as the year and a half progressed, was that we actually weren't going to get any sort of immediate relief through the courts. Not that the courts are the fastest, swiftest way to get relief anyway, but as the decisions started rolling out, it was clear that they were on the side of the government and prepared to take what was called judicial notice and give the governments the benefit of the doubt that what they were saying to us as citizens was correct, right? And judicial notice is a legal concept that allows a judge to say, well, something is so notoriously known to be true that they don't have to provide any proof of its veracity, right? So like vaccines are safe and effective. And so I started seeing this. And then the Law Society got involved with this. The Law Society implemented its own masking and vaccination policy. The courts were doing this. A colleague of mine with Lawyers for Truth went to the Law Society because she's being investigated for giving legal advice to her clients with respect to all of this, the masking. And they asked just recently, just this last month, for her vaccination records to enter the Law Society. Law firms are doing this. They are making it a requirement of their clients to enter into their offices by having a vaccine passport and masking. They all went along with it. This is why I'm here today, because my profession has failed me, and it's failed you, and it's failed all of Albertans, including Pastor Art. And so we as a society cannot stand for this any longer. And that's why I brought that lawsuit against the courts, the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta and the Provincial Court of Alberta, for violating my chartered rights, my inalienable rights that I received from God and not from them. And you know what's going to happen with that case? Well, the Court of Queen's Bench is the named defendant, I'm the plaintiff, and the Court of Queen's Bench, is going to decide whether or not they violated my rights. Talk about kangaroo court. So your decision in this leadership race is going to be very challenging, I suspect, right? Because we have two people here who have demonstrated without a doubt that they are capable and that I am capable in order to fight against the tyranny of the government, which is the thing that we need to focus our attention on right now. And so, if you have the desire for a change, if you can see that the people that have been abusing us, our governments who have been abusing us for at least 2 years and likely longer, if you can see that, then it's time for us to stop the insanity of thinking that they are going to be able, they are going to fix this problem, that they will all of a sudden have a divine epiphany and change their ways. Because I've been told in a meeting with a UCP leadership candidate, Todd Lowen, when he announced that he was running for leadership, that the board of the UCP is not going to change. Jason Kenney, Stephen Harper are going to remain behind the scenes, notwithstanding. And we see this right now because Jason Kenney isn't even going to, he hasn't even stepped down as leader. We, Albertans, I didn't because I don't have a UCP membership, the UCP party members voted him out, and he's still there. So when are we, as a society, going to believe people for what they do? Not what they say, for what they do. And so, I ask you to keep that in mind when you're making this very important decision that you're going to make today, but also in May of 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Talking about doing, that reminds me of the story, a real story from the court. I have been, of course, hammered by the corrupted politicians and judges and crown prosecutors, police officers, for many years, since 2005. And one day I was standing in front of that corrupted judge that hated me. Absolutely, she showed it left and right. And before me was another villain, just like me. And this judge said this statement: "It's not what you say, but what you do matters." And she released him. She says, "You're free to go." And then it was my turn to show up. So I stood over there, and then she reversed the whole thing, and she says, when Pastor Artur Pawlowski says something, he means it, and he's going to do it, therefore he's guilty. That was the justice that was given to me. I'm a doer. And as you can tell, I don't fancy in words and political rhetorics. I actually hate it. And that's the truth. I don't hate many things. But when I listen to UCP debate, I want to puke. I mean, sorry if I offend you. I cannot stand those people anymore. They are fake. At every corner, they're fake. They say to the people what people would like to hear, but their actions are completely opposite. We're talking about tapes. The very men that arrested us and partied in the Sky Palace hypocrisy, and he wants to be your leader so he can implement more tyranny on you. But by the way, he stands for your rights and freedoms. I'm a seasoned veteran. I have been in the trenches all my life. I'm a fighter. Give me an enemy. I have a hard time with this debate. I'm sorry. Because I need an enemy. You're not my enemy.
Ain't that the truth?
I am not accustomed to this. Give me a hyena so I can turn to shreds. Give me Danielle Smith. Or tapes. Or Kenny. Give me a villain so I can face it with a head-on collision and tell them to their face what you are thinking and feeling. It's about time for someone to stand up and tell them to their face, you are wicked, evil tyrant. Go to Ottawa. Get out. Also, some people do not know I was a builder. Believe it or not, I built many houses. And I built some houses in Calgary as well. I was a businessman. I actually had many businesses before I became a pastor. I was very successful. I was a multimillionaire. I had 7 houses. I walked away from all of that to feed the poor. You may think that I'm crazy, and I've heard that many times. I've been called worse, of course. But you know what? I love people. I have been feeding homeless people since 1999, and I will feed Albertans if needs be. If it comes to abortion, I want to throw this in. People say to me, well, it's better to murder that baby than to burden the society with an unwanted child. I say to you, give them to me. I have been feeding tens of thousands of people. I'll feed another tens of thousands of people. I'll feed every child that there is. If you don't want them, give them all to me. I'll build orphanages. I've done it in Africa. I'll take care of them. I'm feeding thousands of people on a regular basis every week. Now, I'll feed thousands more. And I think it used to be, that was the job of a politician or a queen or a king, to take care of people. They were referring to them as mothers and fathers, if you know your history. So if you want, I can be your father. I can feed you. I have been doing this for a long time. We are the glue. We are in solidarity with people like you, because I am like you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Art.